In 2004, Mark Zuckerberg launched the Facebook, a social media juggernaut that would go on to be worth over $500 billion. Facebook's intent initially was to connect Harvard students on campus through the internet. So what is the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes down to Facebook for small businesses? Let's get into it. All right, so as I said, Facebook was founded in 2004 by Mark Zuckerberg and 4 of his roommates. And as recent as, I believe, Q2 of last year, Facebook was valued over $1 trillion. And because of Meta's recent stock price fall, their market cap sits at about $500 billion, still the largest social media platform in the world. And one of the reasons I think that Facebook has been able to stand the test of time and they didn't go the way of MySpace and Vine is because they've always changed with the trends. And they've built their company to be in a position to be able to pivot very quickly. So when Reels became popular, vertical video became popular, they were able to roll those things out into their platform. Even when things like, this is really interesting, there was a social media platform, it's still around, but basically it's a podcasting platform. It's audio only voice rooms. And they saw that that was catching fire for a couple of months, and they rolled out audio chat rooms inside of Facebook and then went on to discontinue them because they saw that that was being a trend and they didn't want to be overtaken by another social media platform. So Facebook has always done a really good job at tapping into what the culture and the people want to see, and they've been able to reverse engineer that into their platform. So across all social media platforms, there's a lot of good and bad that can come from it. But I look at social media like a brick. And I've talked about this a lot on other shows. But for me, when I look at social media, it's something that can amplify more of what exists. And when I use the brick analogy, what I mean is a brick can be used to break a window, or you can use it to build a hospital. It's really up to the user how they want to use it. So I don't think social media in and of itself is a good or bad thing. It's really up to the person that's using it to use it for helpful things or harmful things. And to me, social media has always amplified more of who a person is. I have this debate quite a bit when we talk about, does money change people? And I've always been of the perspective that money just makes you more of the person you are. It amplifies your personality. So if you were a terrible person when you were broke and you got a bunch of money, you're probably going to be a very terrible person when it comes to, falling into a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily change you. It just makes you more of who you are. And social media has done the same thing. So we have this type of culture where we want to talk a lot about how social media has, brought about cyberbullying, and it's brought about, the comparison game that everyone plays. And really, we've all done that to a certain degree. We've all compared ourselves to other people. And to a certain degree, some people have bullied others long before social media has ever came about. It's just made it more accessible for people to do the things that we're already doing. So I don't necessarily think there's any type of moral assessment when it comes to social media, because it's a tool that people can use. Now, on the flip side, from a corporation perspective, corporation can certainly do good and bad things as well. And I would point to the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018 and everything that went on in the political cycle between 2016 and 2020 that Facebook was engaging in. And they ended up having to pay something like, I think, a $5 billion fine for all of the data that they misused during that time period. So obviously, from a corporate perspective, things can happen that are good and bad. But what I want to talk about today specifically is how Facebook, through the scope of business, is both good. I'm sorry, not both, but it's 3 things: good, bad, and ugly. So I'm going to go in reverse order. And I want to talk about the ugly first, and I want to end on something good. And for the ugly side, what I think is a lot of people don't realize the severity of what they post on social media. They don't understand that tone cannot be conveyed through what you're typing. And a lot of times the things that people are saying are either taken the wrong way, or they're a lot shorter than how they meant it or how they would have said it in person. And people just take things the wrong way. And then you start to build this persona of someone online. And I was actually having dinner with my cousin the other night, and we were talking about this kind of social media. And he was telling me how he's curated all of his social media feeds to be exactly what he likes to learn about, whether it's, coding or software development or whatever it is. He has his feed curated to things that, don't really make him frustrated. It's just things that are more educational in nature, which is great. And what I think is that when you have social media fine-tuned that way, that can be a really helpful thing. But what happens is over time, you might have the same person who has views you might not agree with. And that starts to become a perception that you have of that person, even though you've never talked to them about it in person. And what I was telling him is that what I've seen on social media doesn't necessarily correlate to real life, because I've never really seen people in person that are as aggressive as they are on social media. When you have that computer screen in front of you and you're being a keyboard warrior, it makes you a lot tougher than what you would say in person. We've all seen that person who, might have retold the story of something they said to somebody, and they may have inserted a couple of things that they did not say just to make themselves seem more bold or tougher or whatever it is. And social media is the same way. You'll say things that you don't necessarily, that you wouldn't necessarily say in person to someone. So I've always found that people are much more reasonable offline than they are online. And there's a few examples that I pulled that I wanted to talk about of fallouts that have happened because of social media. So 3 pretty famous news stories that came about. One in 2012, where a waitress in North Carolina was fired because she was complaining about a customer's poor tipping. That post went viral, and the restaurant received a lot of negative attention, and then she went on to be fired. In 2015, a journalist in Texas was fired after posting that she had no sympathy for the victims of a mass shooting at a military base. And in 2019, a firefighter in Connecticut was fired for making racist and sexist comments on Facebook. The comments were brought to the attention of the fire department, and members of the public responded and went on to be fired. So people don't understand the long-lasting effect that social media is going to have. And it's really interesting to me because this is the first time my generation specifically has been kind of the guinea pig for Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of these different platforms. We've been inserted into them, and we don't have a barometer for what the fallout's going to be over a 20-year period for all these videos and short-form content that people are making. When I interview people, we do social media background checks, we'll call them, where we go and look at everyone's, public social media things that we can see, just kind of gauge, the character and quality of the person that we're going to hire. And the more stuff that people put out there on social media, the more data that's going to be readily accessible to employers. And that's something that like my parents didn't have to deal with. My dad has said, many, many times that he's very happy that social media wasn't around when he was a teenager because of all the dumb stuff that, people would do. And what we're seeing now is, the youth of today doing similar dumb stuff. They just happen to have a video recorder in their hand when they're doing it. And that's another point of amplification and how things can be perceived to be worse now than they were back in the day. We just have more data on people now than we ever have before. And we're able to pick that data apart and say, okay, things are worse now than they used to be. Well, in actuality, we really can't make that judgment because we haven't had nearly as much data points on people and human behavior as we have now, just because of the lack of social media and how these things have been amplified through time. So from a business perspective, there's a lot of ugly things that happen on social media that can be bad for business owners, for prospective employees, and just overall from a character and personality perspective, you can assess a lot about someone by how they post on social media. And in some ways, it's a shame because like I said a few minutes ago, you don't really know as much about somebody as you do as when you meet them in person. Because sometimes your social media persona can be completely different than how you are in person. And that's solely on the shoulders of the person who has the incongruity between what they're posting and on social media and how they act in real life. It's basically two different personas, which to me lends to some level of a lack of credibility in that person's character, I would say. So again, there's a lot of ugly things that come about on social media. And my advice to everyone has always been, kind of what my cousin has done, which is curating that feed to be things where you don't want to live in an echo chamber where everyone's just telling you your view is right all of the time. But you also don't want to be in this toxic environment that's filled with debate and malice and anger and hatred either. That doesn't help either. And for me, one of the worst things that social media has brought about in people is the time consumption that people have put into the platforms. And if you've never looked at your screen time on your iPhone, I would encourage you to do so. And it'll track and tell you how much time you're spending on social media or YouTube or email or messages. And you can really assess, is that time well spent? And that's one thing that I fear for a lot of parents as they get older and they see their kids get older is, you look back on that screen time app and you're like, oh, wow, I spent, 6 hours on, Facebook today or whatever. And that's time that you can't necessarily get back with your kids. And that's a regret I think a lot of people are going to have is how much time they've dumped into social media compared to doing things that actually matter. All right, so moving on to the bad. So with Facebook, this is the area that I want to bring as much education to small business owners, because there's a ton of scams that are floating about in Facebook specifically that people get taken advantage of millions of times throughout the year. These things happen. So obviously one of the worst things with Facebook is data breaches that have taken place. And we mentioned Cambridge Analytica and the $5 billion fine and all of that. One thing that I don't think gets enough attention on Facebook, and business owners should pay attention to this, is what I call landing page scams. And I'm going to set up the framework for how I would do this if I was one of these scammers. So essentially what you would do is you would buy a product from Fiverr. And the product might be, I've seen this one recently, so this is pretty relevant. ChatGPT is something that's recently launched, and these landing page scammers are taking advantage of it. So what they'll do is they'll build like 1,000 prompts for ChatGPT for marketing. So the prompt, like 100 of the prompts might be popular blogs that you should have on your website. All of these prompts that were generated from ChatGPT, and then they package them into a Google Doc usually. And then what they'll do is they'll go on ClickFunnels or some other landing page website, and they'll build one page surrounding that particular product. And what they're trying to do is collect as much information and data as possible. And some of the slimier people are just trying to collect credit card information through this funnel. And they'll sell this product, which has zero value, and they'll sell it for, $36 or whatever. So they'll build a Facebook business page, an ad account, the landing page. They'll put all of this effort into this product. And then what they'll do is they'll go on Fiverr, and you can actually buy comments on Fiverr. And this is something I guarantee the majority of people are not aware of. So let's say I launch an ad, right, and I put the ad up. I can then go on Fiverr and buy 10 positive comments about that product from people. And it's just either robots or, foreign traffic or whatever it is. And they'll go on there and they'll write comments saying, oh, I love this product. It's great. Rick's a great guy, whatever. And it gives the perception that this product is legitimate. And then what happens is, consumers will come along and be like, oh, wow, I could use some AI prompts for my business. And then they're hooked. They pay the $36 and they either get their information stolen or they're just, bombarded with, more scams on the backs of that. But then what'll happen is, the scam will get busted. They'll tear everything down and they'll just start right back up under a new Facebook page, ad account, and they'll rinse and repeat. And this is terrible because it gives the perception that all Facebook ads are scam-like, or especially in the marketing category. And that's why there's such distrust amongst marketing companies, is because the vast majority of people that label themselves as marketing companies are indeed scammers that simply outsource the work overseas. That has been the most frustrating thing for me as an agency owner, is seeing how other people structure agencies and then slap the label business on them. I challenge anyone to go find videos on YouTube of someone that talks about how to scale a successful agency, and find that person not mentioning outsourcing the work overseas. It's everywhere. And that's been the most frustrating part for me is as someone who has hired internally, we do not outsource, is drawing that contrast of how much better the quality is when you don't have 5 or 6 different vendors that are trying to sync together on a schedule. And that was the thing for me that made the most sense when we started, was I don't want to have to be one of 10 different people that bring a contractor work and then figure out where in the priority list I fall for them. I want to go to my video department and say, okay, we have this video shoot on the 14th, or here's this new client that's coming in. This is the target that we're looking at. And they can't tell me, oh, I'm sorry, I got 5 other clients that I'm working for that they're paying me more, therefore you have to wait. Like that, to me, there's no efficiency in that. So as I understand the cost effectiveness for the agency owner, for the argument to outsource, but it's just never been for me. And when you look at, these bad products that are floating about on social media, they're everywhere when it comes to marketing. People that talk about, how I can get you to the top page of Google, or here's 10 Google business hacks for $99 or whatever. It's all of these scam products that are built by makeshift companies. And I use that word companies very loosely because they don't have any longevity built into their model. Everything is a short-term hit for quick cash. Then once they're found out, once they get blacklisted, they're going to pop up and do it again with a different product under a different name. One of my favorite games I play is I like to look at the social media profile of the person that started the page, or of that, I click on the business page and it's like, oh, they have 8 followers. Oh, they were established 5 days ago. Like, and that's how you can tell, like this was not something that there's any longevity surrounding. They don't have any type of business website. It's just this one-page landing spot. And all of their comments, all of their reviews are sourced from Fiverr. They've paid for them. And they have no way to demonstrate otherwise. If they could, then they could point to, like us. So if you're like, hey, Rob, how can you demonstrate that your reviews aren't fake? Well, you can go to our Google page. You can look at the people that have left us reviews, and you can actually look up those companies and see that they're legitimate. They exist. They do business. So you can see the trail of proper reviews through those channels. Whereas with this, those names and businesses lead to nowhere. They don't exist. So there's a lot of bad things. Landing page scams are very frustrating. One thing I'm going to talk about in depth in another episode is multi-level marketing. And this is basically products that function like a pyramid scheme. They try to recruit more people in their downline more than they try to sell products. So there's a lot of great examples of this, but I don't want to go into too much detail because I am dedicating a whole episode to how much I hate multi-level marketing and pyramid scheme companies. So on the business side, there's a lot of bad things. There's a lot of traps, a lot of scams, a lot of things that people try to tell business owners they need to do in order to be successful. Some of these other ideas would be, oh, you need to go buy followers or buy likes, or you need to go buy attention. And on Facebook, there isn't really anything hard and fast that shows that you can get shut down that way. But on platforms like YouTube, if you go out and buy subscribers, you run a very high risk of getting banned on YouTube from all of that fake traffic, because YouTube monetizes based off of those numbers. And if you're trying to artificially inflate them and game the system, that's a really quick way to get blacklisted inside of YouTube. All right, so next I want to transition and talk about the good. So obviously there's a lot of good things that Facebook has brought about, and there's a lot of excellent brands that not have necessarily came out of Facebook, but they've used that platform to their advantage. And 3 or 4 of these brands that I would look at are Dr. Squatch. If you haven't seen these ads, you absolutely need to go to YouTube and just search a Dr. Squatch ad. They're pretty funny. Dollar Shave Club, massive online razor company. And now seemingly they have retail distribution as well, which is really odd to me. Warby Parker, which is the glasses company, which very much like Tom's, the shoe brand, they donate a pair of glasses for every set of glasses that are sold. And then Casper mattresses, which if you've listened to a podcast, I know you've absolutely heard of that brand. So they've all used social media to their advantage through really complex advertising, and they've built really significant brands through their social media channels. Not just Facebook, but Facebook has been a part of all of their success in some way. And for us, taking it down to a smaller scale, social media has really helped how we've grown our business here. For example, when we first opened Speakeasy Podcast Network in Brighton in 2021, 3 months before we opened, I ran a series of Facebook ads that were targeted towards business owners that were in the top 50% of income earners. That was kind of my target classification. And I ran the ad based on saying that there's a limited number of spaces here in the studio, which there are. And that gave I think we had 15 tour signups before we even opened. And when we did open, we had a lot of really good coverage inside of Livingston County. So we had a lot of really good coverage inside of Livingston County through these Facebook and Instagram ads, so much so that when I would go to chamber events or networking events, people had already known about Speakeasy. They knew about Wayne Media, and that just helps that conversation go that much smoother. So even from a brand awareness perspective, when people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of that before, I've seen that online, or I saw your ad, that goes a long way when you're pitching new business or meeting with a prospective client. That gives you a lot more credibility in that because they've already seen you. They know, they're familiar with you. And Facebook for us has been a very big mover. We don't run advertising a lot internally, which is probably kind of odd because we're a social media advertising company. But largely it's because we have a very strong referral basis that comes out of these periodic ads that we run. So we'll run ads once a quarter, fill up our quota, and then, we'll work on building and developing that business long-term. And that's been a really successful strategy for us. So we don't run ads every day, but when we do run them, whether it's for hiring or for new business, they are successful, specifically in the areas of websites and podcasts. So Facebook for us has been tremendous. And Facebook obviously owns Instagram. It's all Meta now. And both of those platforms have played significantly in the development of our company. And obviously using them as a tool that we manage for other companies as well. So not only have we had wins from it because of the advertising platforms that it's set up, is we've been able to engineer that for other business owners as well and manage those platforms, ads, and social media posts as well as a service for them. So there's a lot of excellent things that has come out of social media for us from a business perspective. And a lot of that is, I think, because we choose to use these tools the right way. We're not trying to be disingenuous in our approach or sell something that doesn't exist. So if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, and you're not using social media and you're wondering, where should I start? I actually did this. It was I'll call it like a forum. It turned into a Q&A. It lasted about an hour. I'm going to make sure I link that up in the show notes, and I'm sure we're playing some of the B-roll over the top of this right now. But basically what I did was I went to a group of entrepreneurs. There was probably 50 of them, and talked to them about 8 things you shouldn't do on social media. And for me, it was much more important to talk about what you shouldn't do rather than what you should do. Because from a consulting point of view, I like to give people the roadmap of here's all the things you need to avoid. Because specifically, every business has a different marketing strategy. And it can even be 2 people that are in the same industry. 2 people that do remodeling can have 2 very different strategies based on how their company is built. And that's why one-on-one consulting is a really helpful tool for marketing. There is no one size fits all for every company. There is no rinse and repeat. That repeat doesn't work on other companies because even if they're in the same industry, they're structured differently. So I find it more valuable to talk about what does not work. That way you can avoid all of that. And it gives you a much clearer picture to what will work for your organization. So you can check that out. That's on YouTube as well. We'll make sure that's linked up in the show notes. And then if you're really wanting to get started and taking social media to, a level that you feel like it's going to, bring you some success, you really need to hone in your branding and messaging. What are the things that your company stands for? Do you have a consistent brand? Do you have a consistent color scheme? Do you have a consistent way that you talk about things? Are there non-negotiables in your business that you stand for? These are things that make a brand and a personality online stand out. People can tell when there's inconsistencies across companies. I see it all the time. A lot of my friends have businesses and they're just very random with how they approach things and talk about things, and there doesn't really seem to be a lot of thought behind it. And people can see that, and that gives people a lack of, not responsibility, but it gives people a lack of trust, I would say, in that person or in that brand or in that company. So you really need to have all of those talking points down and what your company stands for. So for us at Wayne Media, we have 5 things that are really important to us. They're all over our website. And these are the things that, in my opinion, if we do successfully, will make our company continue to be successful. Not from a monetary perspective, but just from here's all of the things that we try to do exceptionally well. And as a byproduct, we'll earn new business and grow our headcount and do all of those things that scalable companies do. So last 2 things I want to talk about and on these final 2 segments. So the quote of the week comes from the man that we've been talking about much of this show, Mark Zuckerberg. He says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So don't be passive about your future. Actively shape it through the power of social media. And I made this statement to the team yesterday. We were having a meeting about kind of the direction of our creative department. And I had said to them that social media isn't a platform, it's a movement. It's something that's going to continually change and evolve. And we need, as creatives, we need to be able to adapt to that and not be married to one platform over another. And I think what Zuckerberg is talking about here is what they've deployed at Facebook, which is why they've had so much long-term success, nearly 20 years in the marketplace as the social media giant. And they have built the roadmap for the things that they want to see come up, and they're not afraid to change with the times either. And as companies and organizations, we shouldn't be afraid to change either. As a matter of fact, last week I announced to our internal team here a pretty big change to all of our applications, our project management tools, our cloud sharing software. We're changing a lot of these things so we can be more efficient as we scale. And yes, it's going to be a lot of work. Yes, it's a lot of administrative tasks. But at the end of the day, as we look to grow the company, I believe these tools are going to make us more successful. They're going to make us more organized and present better results for our clients. And if we constantly live in this situation of, I don't want to change, it's too much time, I don't want to invest in this, nothing is really going to be long-term successful for you. And a great example is when we first built this studio, we actually had a setup where it was in this similar orientation to what we have right now, but we had one camera that was, shooting straight down the middle of the table, and it was a Mevo camera. And this was in 2021. And we had that camera going into an iPad that was recording, and then we had all of our audio recorded through a Rodecaster the same way that we do now. And the video sync would often not match. There'd be, a couple of millisecond delays, and you would notice it. And if we would have left that studio as it was, without great lighting, without what I would call great video, I don't think the studio would have scaled. So then we took it to a second format. We actually took this table and if you're watching the video, we'll put some pictures of what the studio looked like. But we had the table on an angle in this room, and that was so we could set up 4 cameras around that table to capture multiple angles. So we had, and the same cameras we have now, we have 4 Sony cameras, and they're all fed into an ATEM switcher, which then syncs up with a piece of software that syncs the audio and video together. And I liked that orientation, but something always felt off balance in the room. And once I realized, we still have the space to be able to put 4 cameras around this table, I said, let's move the orientation back. We can light it better. We can put more effective lights in the room, and we can still have really good shots over the shoulder if we have 4 people around the table. So we kept evolving the setup based on what was going to be best for the customer experience long term. I do believe if we would have left that studio as version 1, we would have some business, but we wouldn't have grown as quickly as we have, because people recognize quality. People come in here all the time and they say, wow, I didn't realize it was this involved. I didn't realize there was this many cameras or this many lights. It's hard to see all of that, obviously, from what you see from my perspective right now. And you always have to be changing. You always have to have a mindset for the future and what's coming. And you have to have something built into your business that accounts for variable change. And that's something that I love as a business owner, is how much change we go through. And I know, especially for some people on my team, it's very stressful sometimes to have all that change and to manage different software and to be able to pivot and shift that much. But to me, those are the things that make a company successful long term, because you're not so ingrained into what we've always done. You're looking at what we could be if we were to leverage this piece of software or this tactic or this new product. Those are the things, to me, that make a business long-term successful. And when I look at, going into our proverb for this week, comes from Proverbs 15:1. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I thought this was appropriate based on what we started the show with, which is how we engage with each other on social media. Obviously, there's no influencer, even the most popular person in the world, can't bring a stop to how we treat other people online. And in some ways, it's extremely poor. You need to look at, you don't need to look any farther than cyberbullying to see what that has done to a lot of our youth. And for me, it's always much better to go in kind and ask questions than to get all riled up and hostile about something that you might not know the full story on. And a lot of people just respond with this bottled up anger instead of just asking a question. So I've always encouraged people, whenever I teach about debate or I talk about how to negotiate, my first step whenever I feel anger boiling up inside of me is to ask a question. And that does 2 things. One, asking a question gives you space to think about what was just said. And second, it allows the person that you're talking to clarify or be more specific about what it is they were saying. It's not always effective, but I would say 90% of the time it's an excellent tool to be able to diffuse the situation a little bit, think a little bit more clearly, and have a more productive conversation. So hopefully that's helpful. If you're on YouTube or Facebook and you're watching this, I want to know, what do you think about Facebook? How have you used it in your business? Have you found success with it? Do you think it is not useful for you at all? Curious to know what you think. That'll wrap up episode 4 of Theory of Why. I appreciate you all watching. We'll catch you next week. Take care.